This is a summary of Chapter 1 of Neil Fligstein and Doug McAdam's book, Theory of Fields. Neil Fligstein and Doug McAdams state in the first chapter of their book that this is a book that explains how social order develops and social change occurs. The opening chapter consists of 4 to 5 parts, and these parts are intended to introduce the reader to the subject of theorizing social change and social order. Fligstein and McAdams spend a significant amount of the first chapter talking about how other academic disciplines that have created theories regarding social change and how these disciplines, while they have provided substantially to understanding social change and social order, fall short of creating a comprehensive explanation that their theory provides. These disciplines include social movement studies, organizational theory, economic sociology, and historical institutionalism in political science. The authors also spend a bit of time at the end of their first chapter addressing specific theorists and theories and why they aren't as comprehensive as theirs. The middle of the first chapter is spent introducing the components of their theory. The authors state that their theory has 3 main components, which are, number 1, the view that strategic action fields, which are defined as meso-level social orders, are the structural building blocks of modern political organizational life in the economy, civil society, and the state. The second main concept of their theory is that they see any given field as embedded in a broader environment consisting of countless proximate or distal fields, as well as states, which are themselves organized as intricate systems of strategic action fields. And finally, the third component at the core of their theory is an account of how embedded social actors seek to fashion and maintain order in a given field. Now that might be confusing at first, but it might make more sense once you get a firm grasp on what they mean by strategic action fields. To explain this, I want to look at each word separately. First, we have the word strategic. I believe Fligstein and McAdams' use of the word strategic refers to their belief that social actors interested in changing a social order or maintaining it must do so strategically by getting people to go along with a plan. This idea is worked out in more detail later on in the chapter, and I believe they spend a substantial part of their book explaining it. The second word, action, I believe, highlights their belief that social change and social order are based on actions of people within organizations. And lastly, fields is their term which represents a specific organization which is distinct from other organizations in society. So when we put it all together, we see that a strategic action field is something along the lines of an organization where people act strategically to maintain or change the social order. These 3 key ideas are made up of several central elements of their theory, which they introduce to us in the middle of their book, or in the middle of their chapter. So I'll quickly go over these. Number 1 is strategic action fields, which I just went over. Some important things to know about strategic action fields are that strategic action fields can exist hierarchically or in some other form. For example, a division in a workplace can exist among other divisions in a corporation which exists in a market, and these are all strategic fields of action where people try to maintain or change the social order. Second, the boundaries of strategic action field are not fixed, but shift depending on the definition of the situation, and therefore fields are constructed on a situational basis. Third, fields are constructed in the sense that they turn on a set of understandings fashioned by members of the field. There are 4 ways in which this is done. A. There is a general understanding of what is going on in the field and what is at stake. B. There are a set of actors in the field who can be generally viewed as possessing more or less power. Here, actors share a generalized understanding of how their position relates to that of others in the strategic action field. C. There's a set of shared understandings about the nature of the rules in the field which limits what tactics are possible. And D. There is a broad interpretive frame that individual and collective strategic actors bring to make sense of what others within the strategic action field are doing. The second key element is incumbents, challengers, and governance units. Incumbents are people in the field with more power. Challengers are people who attempt to take power and change the social order, and governance units are people or mechanisms that operate in a way that benefits the incumbent of the strategic action field. One important aspect of Fligstein and McAdam's theory is their focus on the importance of cooperation between various figures that make up the challenger. Key element number 3 is social skill and the existential function. By social skill, the authors mean the cognitive ability of humans to use empathy and communication to their advantage to fulfill their goal of creating or changing a social order. This is an important part of their theory, which explains how social change and order are not out of the control of actors. The existential function that they mention will be discussed in Chapter 2, and it refers to our human capacity and need to fashion shared meanings and identities to ensure a viable existential ground for existence. Key element number 4 is the broader field environment. For the authors, strategic action fields are embedded in a broader environment, and this environment plays a crucial part in the status of the strategic action field. The authors list 3 binary types of these other fields, which I don't have time to get into right now, but I'll list them. They are proximate and distal fields, dependent and interdependent fields, and state and non-state fields. These fields are capable of affecting the strategic action field. For example, if there is a crisis in a proximate field, or a dependent field, or a state field, this has the potential to create a crisis in the strategic action field that creates an opportunity for challengers to replace the incumbents. Key element number 5 is exogenous shocks, mobilization, and the onset of contention. This refers to how mobilization can begin to occur. After a shock occurs to the field, there are 3 things that need to happen before contention can arise. First, challengers need to recognize the opportunity for change. After perceiving an opportunity, they must command the organizational resources needed to mobilize and sustain action. And last, the hallmark of a true episode of contention is heightened interaction involving the use of innovative and previously prohibited forms of collective action. If actors do not take advantage of the opportunity, no contention is likely to develop. Key element number 6, episodes of contention. Episodes of contention can be defined as a period of emergent sustained contentious interaction between field actors utilizing new and innovative forms of action. Key element number 7, settlement. Through either sustained oppositional mobilization or the reassertion of the status quo by incumbents and or their state allies, the field begins to gravitate toward a new or refurbished institutional settlement regarding the field rules and cultural norms. The last major section of their book, before a brief conclusion, addresses several theorists and theories associated with social change. Fligstein and McAdams state that, unlike Pierre Bourdieu's theory, theirs focuses on more than just the individual actors of social change. Fligstein and McAdams focus on how people cooperate, how groups get things done, and how we are to understand the interaction that goes on between groups. They believe that Anthony Giddens' theory of structuration does not have a theory of collective action, that actors are instead located in nameless social structures where they are imposed upon to act. The motives of actors, their actual relationships to each other, and the desire to engage in collective action never appear in his work. Fligstein and McAdams also go on to make comments about how institutional theory, network analysis, and social movement theory, while useful, have their limits. In conclusion, I'll quote them. Quote, "The theory of strategic action fields is far more general perspective that allows us to understand how new meso-level social orders are produced, sustained, and come unraveled. Our brief consideration of these perspectives illustrates how by ignoring this deeper level of convergence, each perspective offers an incomplete picture of how organized social life works." So that's a summary of the first chapter of their book, The Theory of Fields.